Well, hello and welcome back to Read Becca for my weekly chatty catch up on everything that I read, everything I'm currently reading, and everything I'm looking forward to reading, as well as some general chit chat. I had a good reading week. I finished up a couple of things. I hit some goals, and I knocked something off of my currently reading that had been on there for a very long time. So that is all positive. Let's, start with the book that I finished that I don't have on hand, and that is 10 Planets by Yuri Herrera and translated by Lisa Dillman. This is a short story collection. It's only about 100 pages, and most of the stories are under 5 pages. So there was a lot of variety in there. Most of this, I would say, is much more in the realm of capturing a moment and a vibe in a thought experiment, an idea, than purely telling a story. These are not space adventures. So if you're going in looking for a satisfying start, middle, and end to a story, this is not going to give you that. But I thought this was really fantastic and absolutely captured the brief of the Ursula K. Le Guin Prize that this was up for last year as being very imaginative, creative fiction. I think for me, a good short story collection doesn't need to have any connection between the stories, but is very much improved by having a thematic connection across the collection. And I did see that here. I really saw that throughout the stories, there was a very strong tie-in to perception. At the beginning of the collection, I think that was weighted much more to physical perception. And as we moved along into the back half, it was much more about cultural and, linguistic language perception of one another. Also, the stories did get longer and more sci-fi as we went along, but I think I actually really liked the even shorter stories and the more, conceptual stories myself, which is not typical. So that was very out of the norm for me, and yet Herrera pulled it off, making me really love these, 2 or 3 page stories that were just about an idea. I think I loved, to that perception topic at the beginning, we went through stories like talking about a world or future where people have technology to make themselves invisible. And so everyone is moving through the world invisibly, and we see how much information about one another we get through that physical perception of one another. Things like the way a nose appears on someone's face may speak to us and tell us a story about who that person is in a way. We have a story of a house that is reacting and responding to the way that the family within it acts, and they change how they act based on the reactions of the house. And so there's this very interactive back and forth between what the house is perceiving of the family living there and it changing how they do that. Really interesting. And then I think my favorite of all of the stories was a very short story that was just about a man in England whose intestinal bacteria become sentient. And that's really about all there is to that story. It's a slice of interrogating a weird idea. And I liked it very much. So I totally want to read more from Yuri Herrera. I know that Shannon from That's a Poe and Cynthia from Book Whimsy buddy read something else by Herrera in the past and very, very much liked it. So I will be wanting to turn to that at some point in the nearish future as well. So moving on to my next item is The Bar Harbor, Retirement Home for Famous Writers and Their Muses by Terri-Lynne DeFino. And this was good but mixed. So I had this paused for a long time. I started it and then got busy with other things. But this is obviously an entire cast of elder protagonists for the most part. And this was a fascinating book in that it's a very bookish book and it's a very grounded book. So we're kind of in 2 timelines. One is in the late 1990s, is the actual story of the Bar Harbor retirement home. And we are going to this retirement home that is specifically designated for writers, and it's very upscale. And these are kind of like high-end popular writers for the most part, as well as some editors. And they're facing someone showing up. Someone is joining their ranks that is a really big name, and he's very charismatic, Alphonse. And he's a bit of a Casanova, not just with the ladies, but also with the guys. And he is going to be this major presence there. We are also looking at it through the eyes of a character named Cecibel, who works there, but is also a resident. And there are a couple people that work there, work and live there in that same fashion. and they're sort of foundlings-ish that the person who ran the place had collected and welcomed in to have a very safe place because they've been through some trauma in the past. So we're digging into Sisabel's backstory, as she is a super fan of this writer who is about to enter the house. And she has that perception, I guess, tempering everything in how she sees him. So he comes in, sweeps in, and very quickly it becomes clear that yeah, the reason he's there is because, you know, he's really gregarious and outgoing and enthusiastic, but he's also old and deteriorating. And so we're seeing that happen. But what he brings to this place is that he's the only one who is still writing. Everyone else has kind of put things aside. So he brings back this flourish for writing. And I think that was maybe the thing that I loved the most, is him bringing life and passion for writing back to these people who have kind of given up, for lack of a better way of saying it. And so the split, the timeline split, is with a story in the 1950s. But in fact, that 1950s story is the book that he is writing. And it's kind of a very, like, a romantic drama, I would say, a bit in the style of, like, The Notebook. And so I didn't totally love that story, but it was well written, it felt like, and well characterized. It's about a romantic drama between a young woman and a man who goes off and joins the Navy, and they had this sort of young love affair, and she's from a very Italian family, and so there are a lot of expectations about her, and she can't just love him. And so it's everything about the stops and starts of their romance, their relationship as the years passed by. And so it's taking place mostly over about a decade from the mid-1950s. And it's very dramatic and sweeping. But he catches everyone in the home up in this story very much. So I think that's all I want to say about story. The characterization here is so fantastic. I think it's very good, and one of the elements that I liked to see is that Sisabel, part of the trauma and why she is living there as a resident and a carer, is because she had an accident and has been through disfigurement. So she's constantly, like, trying to hide herself and hide her face and not participate in the world. And so she's in a similar place as these authors who have come and just kind of hidden themselves away from the world, even though she's a relatively young woman. And she also begins to open up over the course of this as things progress along. And so it's fascinating to see her growth as well as the growth of these people who are nearing the end of their life. So I love the characterization in that element. What I really didn't like about the characterization here, or not even the characterization, like the whole tone of this book is very sexual without being, like, sexy or erotic or even very graphic. There's not a lot of sex on page. There is some though, but there's not a lot of very, very sexual content, but it feels like it's kind of dripping throughout the book, which is gross. But so jumping back to what the story that they're writing, this Italian family, you can very much feel that Italian gender roles and machismo and the gaze, the male gaze is very present there. So you just feel it all throughout the story, and I really didn't like that. It was very heavy to the story and removed all of the lightness and joy that I had with it, and it felt kind of weird, especially given the author is a woman. So maybe that this was good writing because she did get across that very Italian-American sensibility, and also this very Casanova character, well, I think, in making me feel icky about their perception of the world at times. But also I could have done without it. I also just wasn't a huge fan of the book that they were writing, like, was meh to me. And yet we're supposed to be thinking that these are literary titans, and yet they're writing a very mediocre book, as far as I'm concerned. So that didn't really impress me in any way or convince me. But it was much more about the passion that was being reignited in them, and that did come across. So overall, I liked this. I definitely would read from the author again, but it wasn't the book that I thought I was gonna love going into it. So very, very good. And then I read a comic book. This is Why My Cat is More Impressive Than Your Baby by Matt Inman. And he is the comic of The Oatmeal, which is a long-running webcomic, and he's put out a ton of published comics, games. I've kickstarted at least some of his games. So I actually got an email because of that he has a show coming, or not a show, a movie coming out on Netflix based off of one of the games. And so I was reminded that I have been meaning to pick up this collection of comics for a long time, because it is very much a topic that I love. As a genuinely child-free person, this is definitely something I agree with and find funny. So this is on the topic of cats being superior to babies, start to finish. Occasionally dogs do come up as well. It's not a story. It's much more a collection of individual comics, but there is sort of a theme and progression to it, a little bit, but definitely not a story. I love Matt Inman's art style and his sense of humor, and of course, the topic appeals to me, so I very much enjoyed this one. My in-progress reading, I have not made a ton of progress on, but I'm still making progress. I have read most of Half an Inch of Water by Percival Everett. I've only got, I think, 2 more stories. I'm still plowing through Wicked. I'm at about 300 pages. And I started on audio Mossflower by Brian Jones. So my upcoming week, looking forward though, so that's what I'm actively reading. Next weekend is Mid-Month Book Bash. So I have a couple of theme ideas if I do a vlog. So I'm intending to do a vlog. And I don't know, because the theme ideas I want to do would sideline my TBR for the month, at least for next weekend. So do I want to do that? At least one of my theme ideas is books that I've had out from the library and probably need to go back very soon. So that would be good, but also I want to get to what was on my monthly TBR. So I don't know. I'm in the air on what's coming up in the coming week. Anyway, so I think that's it for books. Let's go forward to what I watched this week. I did watch a good amount of stuff this week. I finished up The Bear season 3, and I enjoyed it so much. This is such a consistently high quality show. Every single episode is so great, so well executed, from performances, the cinematography, the storytelling. So good. Characterization, character interactions are so believable and real. I think we fleshed out a lot more to backstories in this season. The first episode, I think, is the centerpiece of this season because it's very silent. There's little talking, and it's mostly recap, actually. So it's kind of a let's catch back up on everything that happened and deal with the emotions that Carmi is feeling. So good, so good. So this has just been a stellar show. I will be shocked if they do not win all the awards again. I also watched a stand-up special, Eddie Izzard's Wunderbar. So Eddie Izzard remains a very unique individual, and this, I think, was more of the same if you already like Eddie Izzard, but it doesn't feel like much new. Coming off recent stats of many marathons, that was a big topic, and touring in different languages, there were a lot of linguistic jokes, and so those were kind of expected elements that came up prominently here, and so I enjoyed it. I very much like Izzard's comedy, and so it was a continuation of Eddie Izzard's work for me. What else did I finished up Bodkin as well. Bodkin is a new series that came out following a true crime podcast in Ireland, but Will Forte is the star, who is coming from America to Ireland to do this podcast, looking into the disappearance decades before of 3 people on Samhain night. And Will Forte was the highlight of the show, mainly in that he's this overly genuine, like very convinced of himself podcaster, and like that's the perfect role for him, kind of, and everyone sees him as sort of naive in Ireland and doesn't really take him seriously. So I liked that element, but the show started off great and then kind of went off the rails in the back half, so it was much weaker in the back half. I do hope they get funding to maybe continue on and do another season where he's covering a different story as this podcaster, but I don't know. I don't think it's going to get that level of popularity, unfortunately. Anyway, so I liked it but didn't love it. So I think that's it for all the stuff I watched. Life was crazy again this week, unfortunately. It was a lot of sad back and forth, or anxiety-inducing back and forth, and there was a big situation. Trying to deal with someone who had some cats, and like personally dealing with that, and talking to the shelter, trying to kind of intercede and help things make sense for this person who was in a very emotional situation. And it not going the way that they were hoping, I don't think, really, but I think probably for the best outcome for the cats. So it was very hectic. That, among other things that have been very stress-inducing in my life, it was just a stressful week again. And that is a continued theme, running theme in my life. So I think that's, oh, the road work has finished outside of my house. They finally removed all of the barriers. So after, what has it been, a month? I think they're done with that. However, I have no idea what is going on. They still have holes in my yard and a power cord running through my yard and across the street to who knows where. So I don't know what's going on with that, but at least the road is open, my driveway is open, I can do all normal stuff, and my couch can get delivered next week. So, okay, winding down to my recommendations this week. I have 2 good recommendations for you. The first is from Sui's Book Banter. Sui did a wonderful video on the topic of reasons why you should read and gave us 5 reasons. Not that we need more convincing, but you have 5 more reasons if you need them. The other one is from Infinite Text, who I think I've done a recommendation recently as she just returned from a hiatus, but she's been all hits recently and did a massive list addressing fears about starting a booktube channel and giving practical solutions to those fears. And it's just a wealth of information, really. So highly recommend, whether you are thinking about starting a channel and afraid for any of these reasons, or if you have started a channel and want to be informed a little bit more on how to deal with the things that you might encounter that are scary, definitely a resource, 100%. So I will link both of those down in the description as always, and I think that is it for me this week. So thank you so very much for watching.